Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been dealing with chronic migraines for the past year, and they've gotten significantly worse over the last few months. The pain has become so unbearable that I had to take a leave of absence from my job as a software developer. After trying various over-the-counter medications and home remedies, I finally managed to get an appointment with a neurologist, which took 3 months of waiting. My mother has always been my rock through health issues. She's been to every major medical appointment with me since I was diagnosed with anxiety at 15. So naturally, I wanted her there for this important consultation. We planned everything carefully, making sure to coordinate with my sister since my mother usually watches my niece on Fridays. At the beginning of the week, my mother contacted my sister about the appointment. She explained that she wouldn't be able to watch her granddaughter that Friday because she needed to take me to an important neurologist appointment at 11 a.m. My sister was completely fine with it, saying her boyfriend would come over to watch the little one. My mother double-checked if they'd be okay for the full 2 hours they'd be gone, and my sister assured her everything was sorted, and her boyfriend was happy to help. My mother even followed up on Wednesday, checking if everything was still arranged, with her boyfriend watching my niece. My sister confirmed everything was still good to go. But when Friday morning came, my sister's boyfriend arrived at our house and immediately threw us for a loop. He apologetically told us that he could only stay until 11 because he had to be back home by then. My mother was visibly shocked, pointing out that the appointment wouldn't even have started by then. The boyfriend revealed he had actually told my sister about this time constraint. My mother quickly texted my sister about this revelation. My sister's response was infuriatingly casual, just a brief message saying she forgot to mention it, complete with a lol at the end. The poor boyfriend had driven 40 minutes to our house for absolutely nothing. He tried to help by offering to take my niece with him, but my mother, attempting to salvage the situation, made what I now consider a horrible decision by saying we'd just take her with us, assuring me she was usually well behaved at doctor's appointments. I wanted to protest, but seeing how stressed my mother already was, I kept quiet. The drive to the neurologist's office was relatively peaceful, but that's where the peace ended. In the waiting room, my niece turned into a tiny tornado. She ran circles around the chairs singing Baby Shark at the top of her lungs. Other patients were giving us looks, but I tried to zone out and focus on my breathing exercises. My head was already pounding. The actual appointment was even worse. When the doctor tried to ask about my migraine frequency, my niece started screaming for her mother. My mother tried to quiet her, but it was useless. Every time the doctor asked a question and I tried to answer, my niece would interrupt with crying and screaming about wanting to go home. My mother kept trying to soothe her, but nothing worked. The doctor was visibly struggling to maintain her professional composure. What should have been a 30-minute consultation stretched into 45 minutes of interrupted conversations and fragmented medical history taking. Back home, my mother sent an angry message to my sister about how disruptive her daughter had been during this specialist appointment we'd waited 3 months for. My sister's response was dismissive, asking what we expected taking a 2-year-old to a doctor's appointment. When my mother pointed out that we wouldn't have had to if she'd been honest about her boyfriend's availability, my sister tried to deflect blame, claiming it wasn't her fault. He didn't tell her earlier. My mother called her out on this lie, but my sister just brushed it off, saying we could just reschedule if it was such a big deal. That's when my mother, who rarely loses her temper, finally snapped. She told my sister that she would be paying for the cancellation fee and new appointment booking, and that she shouldn't expect any babysitting help the following week. My sister protested, saying she had work and my mother couldn't do this to her. My mother told her she should have thought about that before ruining my important medical appointment. My sister tried to rally support in our family group chat, but it backfired. Our other siblings and our father all took our side. She ended up having to pay $150 for the cancellation and rebooking fee, and my mother took a month-long break from babysitting duties. My sister had to scramble to find alternative childcare and ended up having to pay for a daycare service, which apparently cost her quite a bit more than she expected. The silver lining? I got a new appointment 2 weeks later, went in with just my mother, and finally got started on proper migraine treatment. As for my sister, she's become surprisingly better at communication since her month of paying for daycare. Funny how that works. I've lived in my house for over 15 years now. It's a beautiful two-story home that my wife and I bought right after getting married. We spent years renovating it ourselves, turning it into our dream home. The neighborhood was always peaceful, at least until 6 months ago when our next-door neighbor sold their house to this woman, who I can only describe as Karen. From day one, Karen was different. She'd patrol her front yard with binoculars, claiming she was monitoring suspicious activities. She'd corner anyone walking by and ramble about government conspiracies. My wife and I tried to be polite, but we kept our distance. 3 months ago, Karen started ordering massive amounts of construction materials. Huge trucks would arrive daily, dropping off concrete blocks, steel beams, and other supplies. When my wife tried to ask her about all the deliveries, Karen just glared at her and started ranting. She told my wife about how the government was hiding the truth about an upcoming nuclear war, and that only prepared people would survive. She even had the nerve to say my wife should be thankful that Karen was bringing awareness to the neighborhood. When my wife tried to respond, Karen cut her off, calling her a sheep and warning her not to come begging for shelter when the bombs started falling. We later found out she'd hired some shady construction company to build an underground bunker. The workers would start at dawn and continue until late at night. The noise was awful, but we tried to be understanding. That is, until we started noticing cracks appearing in our walls. I went to talk to her about our concerns. When I tried to explain that the construction was damaging our house and we needed to discuss it, she dismissed me completely. She declared that our house problems weren't her concern and explained that her bunker needed to be large enough to store supplies for at least 5 years. When I pointed out that she was digging under our property, she just scoffed and challenged me to prove it, saying I couldn't see what was underground. She even had the audacity to add that property lines wouldn't matter during a nuclear winter anyway. We tried contacting the city about permits, but somehow she'd managed to get them all approved. The construction continued, and the cracks in our house got worse. We were planning to get a lawyer involved, but we didn't act fast enough. Last week at around 2 a.m., we woke up to what sounded like an earthquake. Our bedroom floor started tilting, and before we could react, half of our house literally sank into the ground. My wife suffered a broken leg and 3 broken ribs. I ended up with a concussion, a broken arm, and multiple lacerations. The investigation revealed that Karen's bunker had compromised the entire foundation of our house. Her construction company had tunneled way beyond her property lines, creating a massive underground network that was practically a small underground city. The company, it turned out, wasn't even properly licensed for this kind of work. The lawsuit was straightforward. Between the property damage, medical bills, pain and suffering, and the fact that her actions could have killed us, our lawyers were confident. What made it even better was discovering that Karen had recently inherited several $1,000,000 from her late father, which explained how she could afford all this construction. The court case was almost comical. Karen tried to defend herself by bringing in experts who testified about imminent nuclear threats. She even tried to argue that she was providing a public service. The judge was not amused. In the end, we were awarded $4.2 million in damages. Karen was also charged with criminal negligence and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Her precious bunker was filled in and sealed under court orders. While she was in prison, the city discovered that her original building permits had been obtained through forged documentation. They levied additional fines against her, effectively wiping out what little she had left after paying us. After getting out of prison, she moved in with her sister in another state. Apparently, she's still convinced the nuclear war is coming, but now she has to settle for a regular basement as her bunker. My wife and I used part of the settlement money to rebuild our house, making it even better than before. We also bought the lot where Karen's house used to be and turned it into a beautiful garden. I had landed my dream job as a project manager at a state university after spending nearly a decade in the corporate world. The position offered better work-life balance, great benefits, and the chance to make a real difference in education. The pay wasn't as good as my previous corporate job, but I was willing to make that trade-off for a more fulfilling career. The university environment was exactly what I needed, mostly relaxed, focused on actual results rather than just numbers, and filled with intelligent people who were passionate about their work. Well, most of them anyway. There was one particular thorn in everyone's side: the department accountant. Picture this: a woman who treated the department's budget like her personal kingdom. Every purchase, no matter how small, had to go through her, and she made sure everyone knew it. She'd demand extensive documentation for a $5 purchase one day, then approve a $500 expense the next day with barely a look. Everyone knew she only had the job because she was related to someone on the board. One morning, I went to her office with receipts from the previous week's training supplies. When I greeted her, she barely looked up from her computer and told me dismissively to put them in the tray, saying she'd get to them when she got to them. When I mentioned that some needed immediate processing for reimbursement, she just sighed dramatically and made a snide comment about how project people always needed everything immediately. I learned pretty quickly to just play her game. I'd document everything meticulously, even things she didn't usually ask for, just to avoid the back and forth. It wasn't worth the headache. About a year into my job, I was handed what would become my favorite project. The director, one of the most down-to-earth bosses I've ever had initiated a 5-year training program that everyone referred to as his baby. When my manager passed it to me to maintain, I was determined to make it successful. I was lucky to have an amazing project coordinator working with me. She handled all the detailed stuff like supplies and facilities, while I focused on the bigger picture: budget, content, and client relations. We made a great team and the program was running smoothly. Then came the tissue incident. My coordinator walked into my office one day looking like someone had just kicked her puppy. She told me I wouldn't believe what had happened. When I asked what was wrong, she explained that the accountant was refusing to approve the tissue box's purchase. I was shocked, knowing these were the same tissues the director had specifically requested for every session. She confirmed this and told me she'd even shown the accountant his email from the start of the program, but the accountant had dismissed it, saying the director didn't make or enforce purchasing policy. I felt my blood pressure rising. These weren't fancy tissues, just basic boxes we'd buy in bulk from the warehouse store because our regular office supplier didn't carry them. We'd been using them for months without issue. When I asked what the accountant wanted, my coordinator rolled her eyes and said she needed sufficient written justification. I could have escalated this to my manager or the director. They would have sorted it out with one phone call. But something in me snapped. If she wanted justification, I would give her justification she'd never forget. I told my coordinator to pull up a chair, saying she'd want to watch this. I opened my email and started typing. I wrote about the psychological comfort provided by easily accessible tissues during emotional training sessions. I detailed the cost-benefit analysis of having tissues readily available versus the lost productive time of participants leaving to find tissues elsewhere. I included a paragraph about the professional image projected by providing basic comfort items to participants. I even threw in some research about the importance of facial tissues in maintaining proper hygiene in an educational environment. 5.5 pages later, I hit send. My coordinator was wiping tears of laughter from her eyes as she told me how beautiful it was and how much the accountant would hate it. I smugly agreed that was exactly what I was counting on. The next day, my coordinator burst into my office wearing the biggest grin I'd ever seen. She excitedly told me the purchase had been approved and the accountant hadn't said a word, just processed it. But not only did we never have another issue with tissue purchases, but I started hearing from other project managers that the accountant had become surprisingly cooperative with their basic supply requests too. Apparently, word of my epic tissue justification email had spread, and no one wanted to risk receiving a similar novel-length response about paper clips or sticky notes. The director eventually heard about the incident and actually printed out my email to keep in his entertainment folder. He told me it was the most professional case of malicious compliance he'd ever seen. For the remaining 4 years of the program, everything ran smoothly. The accountant even started approving our routine purchases without her usual song and dance. And the tissues? They remained a standard item at every training session, silently mocking the accountant's defeat in the great tissue paper war of our department. It had been an exceptionally long day at the investment firm where I work as a financial analyst. After spending 12 hours poring over market trends and preparing client presentations, I desperately needed to restock my skincare supplies. My skin was showing the stress of the past few weeks, and I knew a good vitamin C serum and some hydrating masks would help get me back on track. I decided to stop by Sephora on my way home. The store was just a few blocks from my office, and I figured it would be relatively quiet at this hour. I've been planning this shopping trip for a while, having made a detailed list of everything I needed to replenish in my skincare routine. Working in finance means long hours in air-conditioned rooms, and maintaining a solid skincare routine helps me look professional and put together even during the most stressful periods. When I walked into the store, I grabbed one of their black shopping baskets. I was still in my work clothes, navy blue pixie pants, a cream blouse, and my favorite plaid blazer with brown and navy blue patterns. My brown leather laptop bag, which doubled as a purse, hung from my shoulder containing the remnants of my workday, spreadsheets, market analyses, and my trusted laptop. I was methodically making my way through my shopping list, having already picked up 6 items including my Holy Grail moisturizer and a new glycolic acid toner when I heard it. That unmistakable throat-clearing sound that entitled people seem to have mastered. I moved to the side thinking someone needed to get past me in the aisle. The throat clearing came again, more aggressive this time. The woman behind me complained that she had been waiting for help for the past 5 minutes. I turned around to face her, a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s, clutching a product in her manicured hands. I responded with a confused, "Sorry," not understanding what she wanted from me. She then explained that she had been standing there for 5 minutes trying to get my attention because she needed to know if a product was available in the back since there were none on the shelf. I told her directly that I didn't work for Sephora and never had. She insisted that, of course, I worked there, demanding to know what else I would be doing there if I wasn't an employee. At this point, I was getting irritated. I'd dealt with similar assumptions throughout my career, people assuming I was the assistant instead of the analyst, the server instead of the customer, and now apparently the sales associate instead of the shopper. I challenged her to explain what about my outfit made her think I worked there, and told her that I was shopping with money from my job as a financial analyst, pointedly adding that it was the job I got with my fancy schmancy college degree. She blinked rapidly, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She asked if I could at least find an employee to help her, since I was already there. I refused, explaining 3 key points. First, that I'd just spent 12 hours analyzing market trends and preparing presentations for clients who, unlike her, actually respected my time. Second, that I was there spending my hard-earned money on skincare products because, contrary to her assumptions, I was a customer just like her. And third, that there were several actual Sephora employees wearing black uniforms with red accents who would be happy to help if she'd bothered to look for them instead of harassing random black shoppers. The woman's mouth fell open and a nearby shopper who had been watching the exchange snickered. A Sephora employee who had overheard the latter part of our conversation quickly approached and asked if everything was okay and if she could help find something. The woman expressed relief at finally getting actual service, while complaining that her other employee, meaning me, had been extremely rude to her. The employee quickly corrected her, explaining that I was not a store employee but a customer, and that based on what she had overheard, the woman had been harassing me. She added that Sephora takes customer harassment very seriously, whether it's directed at staff or other shoppers. The woman's face turned red, and she threatened to report this to the manager. The employee told her that she was the manager and would be happy to discuss this further, but first needed to make sure the woman understood that approaching random customers and demanding service from them, especially when making assumptions based on their appearance, was completely unacceptable. I took this opportunity to move to another aisle and finish my shopping in peace. As I checked out, I could still hear the woman arguing with the manager near the front of the store. The manager caught my eye as I was leaving and gave me an apologetic smile. I smiled back, knowing that at least one person in this situation truly understood customer service, and it wasn't the one demanding it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.